from the blackest corners of your mind, they call, pulling you deep into shadow, twisting your senses, keeping you from sleep. It's time to face your darkest fears. This is Tales to Terrify. Good evening, children of the night, and welcome to Week 2 of Women in Horror Month. Before I pass you off to Meredith, I just wanted to let you know about the latest installment of our Patreon author interview series, which will be released this weekend. This month, Seth digs into the mind and methods of author, editor, and regular contributor to the show, Douglas Gwillem. Head over to patreon.com/talestoterrify to check it out. Now, let me hand you back over to Meredith as we dive back into Women in Horror Month.
Thank you, Drew. Hello again, children of the night. Welcome to Week 2 of Women in Horror Month here at Tales to Terrify. This year, I have the pleasure of introducing you to 4 lovely ladies whose siren songs will lure you into dark and disturbing places. Without further ado, let's meet woman in horror number 2. Sapphire Lazuli is a trans woman of color writing strange and lyrical poetry out of Australia. Her prose can best be described as sparse or distant, where the placement of a word on the page might hold more meaning than its Oxford definition. She creates experimental worlds of horror in which she explores marginalization, loss, and romance that is hurtful. There is anger in that prose as much as there is sadness. Horror, for Sapphire, is the perfect vehicle for exploring destruction. It attracts her as a genre because it is so free, allowing every moment of a feeling to be expressed and understood. She channels this in the strangeness of her prose, drawing on both horror experimentalism like Lynch and Silent Hill 2, as much as she does on the classical poetry of Sappho and Homer. On being a woman in horror, Sapphire's work of late has been more angry than usual. What was once a gentle ferocity exploring the impacts of marginalization is bubbling into a fury in the face of what allowed that marginalization in the first place. Art, she feels, is one of the most important things in the face of adversity. It is a voice back to the people. It is an expression for the muted. Her debut novella, Our Witchless Flesh, a visceral poem of sapphic love, systemic destruction, and autonomous exploration, comes out July 26th. And her 2 short films, Haunted Houses and Houses That Haunt, a ghost story unlike any other, and Those Were the Days, a trans horror film, can be found on her YouTube channel, Sapphic Sapphire. Thank you, Sapphire. Now, back to our voice of the void, Drew Sebastini.
Thank you, Meredith. We'll hear from Meredith again next week, but for tonight, let's get to our fiction. We have one longer tale for you this evening about a priest who befriends a woman with a devilishly good voice. Our story tonight comes from Jessica Lévai. Jessica Lévai loves stories and has a PhD in Egyptology. Her first novella, a vampire opera in verse, won the Lord Ruthven Award for fiction, and her next book will be out sometime this year. She dreams of one day collaborating on a graphic novel and meeting Stephen Colbert. Children of the night, join me for Jessica Lévai's The Blessing of Saint Blaise, a Tales to Terrify original.
Father Kovac was a priest well liked by his congregation. He was nearly 60, with a sense of humor and a knack for remembering faces. But even if he weren't, he would have noticed the new individual in the line of congregants waiting to receive a blessing on the feast of St. Blaise. Among the parishioners of this inner suburban working-class church, this young woman stood out. There was her dress, for one thing. At first, Father Kovac thought she might be a religious sister, dressed in a modest suit of dark wool, hemline below the knee, so different from the jeans and sweatshirts even the elderly had adopted as mass-going attire in recent years. But the nearest community was a town away, and he knew the sisters well from fellowship work they'd done together. This woman did not seem familiar, nor did she wear any cross he could see. Then there was her affect. His congregation was generally patient with Kovac's quirks, like his indulging in Latin during Mass on special occasions, his academically oriented homilies, and, of course, his dedication to customs like the blessing of throats every February 3rd. While some were in line out of faith, more were there out of curiosity, for the novelty, or simply to humor him. He didn't mind, but this newcomer stood and waited in line with her arms hugging her chest so tightly her knuckles turned white, and her gaze did not leave the floor until she was before him in the sanctuary. When she lifted her face to expose her throat, he saw that her eyes were filled with tears, and he was moved. He held the candles, which formed a cross in their golden holder, over her head and spoke the words of the blessing. Through the intercession of St. Blaise, bishop and martyr, may God deliver you from every disease of the throat and from every other illness. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. At this point, the tears sparkled down the woman's cheeks. She slipped quickly out of line and out of the church. Kovac watched her go. This was not the first time his blessing had gotten such a reaction, but usually that came from old women or cancer patients, desperate and scared. His mind returned to the young woman several times over the course of the evening, and he remembered her in his prayers that night. She did not return to the church the following Sunday, nor the Sunday after that, nor the Sunday after that, and he gave her no further thought until the next February 3rd, when she again appeared before him for the blessing. It was the same suit, the same posture, the same tears. He resisted the pull to follow her as she left the church. The next year, when she returned, he did not resist. Still holding the candles, he mumbled an apology to the next parishioner in line and walked swiftly after the mysterious woman, only to lose sight of her as she crossed the street, got into a car, and drove away. The year after that, he was ready and quicker, handing the candles to the deacon, hustling down the steps and catching up with her in the parking lot. He called to her, "Miss, are you all right?" He expected her to keep walking, but she stopped. She turned to him, a crumpled tissue in hand. "Yes?" she asked. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all." He took a moment to catch his breath. Stairs were getting a little harder every time. She waited for him. "I've seen you here for this blessing before. What's your name? You're not a member of the parish, are you?" She paled. Her voice, when it came out, was hardly more than a whisper. "I'm not. Is that a problem?" "No," he answered. "Because not many places perform the ritual, and I—" She broke off. Her hand went to her throat protectively. "It's quite all right. I can see you find it meaningful," Kovac said. "I don't mean to pry, but if—" "Do you believe in the devil?" He was taken aback. The question was unexpected, though the answer was obvious, wasn't it? In the moment he took to deliberate with himself the best response, the woman turned from him. Her breath steaming in the winter air, she said, "My name is Catherine Wooster." With that, she ducked into her car and was gone. Kovac did not look for Catherine at any of the upcoming masses. He knew she wouldn't come, but he did not forget about her. Quite the opposite. Now his curiosity had a name to accompany it, and while he debated the ethics of Googling someone under his spiritual care, in the end he couldn't help himself. He didn't share the search with anyone else, though one of the younger parishioners could have made faster work of it. On his own, with the rectory's rickety Wi-Fi, it took him a week to find a Catherine Wooster with a face he recognized. He blinked at the pixelated image. It was her. And she was familiar after all. The person in the picture was dressed stylishly, with none of the modesty she had worn to his church, but he recognized her eyes. They were not yet haunted in the picture. As for her voice, the small, scratched thing she used to say so little to him, there was the surprise. For Catherine Wooster, in another life, was a singer. He opened articles in new tabs and read them, one by one. A promising talent, the first called her. Another described her debut at a local opera company. Words like clear, lyrical, and instrument were used. Even to a man versed in the linguistic obscurities of mass text, it seemed a little much. He clicked a link to a YouTube video. After 30 seconds of listening, he understood and agreed with all the words and came up with a few of his own. Magical, angelic. The most recent article he could find dated 6 years ago and described a tour in Europe. It would be her last. The performances went well. The reviews and audience reactions were superb. But the tour had to be called off suddenly. After her last concert in Venice, she never sang again. Of all the theories on the internet as to why she retired from the stage and any visible public life, the most convincing was that she had developed polyps. This was common enough, he knew, and the surgery to correct them could always go wrong. Kovac felt great sympathy for Catherine. He knew the glory of singing and could imagine how horrible it must be to lose. Surely God had his reasons, but they were as mysterious and mystifying as ever. But while something as banal as a bad surgery might have explained her soft voice and reluctance to speak, it did not explain the haunted look in Catherine's eyes, nor why she had asked him about believing in the devil. The next February 3rd, Kovac was waiting for her. He said Mass that Wednesday morning to a small group of regulars. It made it easy to scan the crowd, and Catherine was nowhere to be found. When it was over, he announced that he would be performing the blessing, and most of those in attendance got up and filed into the center aisle. He took up the white candles in their holder and lighted them. The first man in line had COPD, and his continued smoking would interfere with any power Blaise possessed. Kovac sighed and blessed him anyway, and the next in line, and so on. It took maybe 5 minutes to get through the line, and he drifted into a trance with the repetition of the words, the mumbled amens from the recipients. When he reached the end of the line, there Catherine stood, her throat bare, looking up at him silent but hopeful. Kovac smiled at her, relieved and at the same time full of adrenaline. It was like a crush. He spoke the words, held the candles at her throat, and when it was over, she mouthed the word Amen, but no sound came out. He moved more quickly than last year, or maybe she decided to tarry, but he caught her in the narthex before she left the church. "Miss Wooster," he said to her, and offered her his hand to shake. "Reverend," she replied, talking to his hand but stumbling over the title. "Kovac," he answered, "or you can just call me Pete. Father Pete. Plenty of my parishioners do." She nodded but didn't reply. "It's good to see you again, Catherine," he started and cringed. Her Christian name was maybe an intimacy too far. She just looked at him. "Would you like to get a cup of coffee?" She looked to her left and right, but the congregants had long shuffled out into the frigid air, and they were alone in the narthex. "Why?" "Good question. This is the 5th time you've come for the blessing. I'd just like to get to know you." "But why?" He shrugged the way he always did before trotting out a line, "A shepherd cares about his sheep." "I'm not your sheep." Her words hung in the cold air, echoing off the plain walls. It was the loudest she'd even spoken in his presence. "I'm sorry," he said. "I offended you. I didn't mean to." "No, that's not it," she said. He stepped back into the church where it was warmer. She didn't follow. "It's just that I'm not Catholic. I'm not even baptized, actually." "Okay, more confusion. But you're still a human being, the image and likeness of God and all that." Now she flinched. "Let me buy you a cup of coffee, or tea, or cocoa," Kovac said, noting the few flakes that fell without any enthusiasm outside. "I promise I'm not trying to hit on you." She blushed. "I didn't think you were." He smiled again. "Now we're both embarrassed. We're even. Come on, I'd just like to talk, and it's freezing. Let me get into my streets, and we can go." She bit her lips, gave him the tiniest nod. He hurried to the sacristy, tossed his chasuble and alb on the hanger, and grabbed his sweater. She was still there, waiting. He shrugged on his coat and ushered her out. They settled into a table by the window, he with his coffee, black with 2 sugars, and she with an herbal tea with honey. "So," he said, "where are you from?" Catherine stirred her tea with the soggy wooden stick, which she then laid against the napkin. "Is that really what you want to know about me?" "Fair enough." Kovac sipped his coffee, prepared to burn his tongue, but annoyed all the same when he did. He rubbed it against his teeth. "The blessing of St. Blaise. If you're not baptized, how do you even know about it? Not a lot of churches bother." "That's for sure." The tea in her cup reached the end of its swirl, and she sipped it gingerly. "Would it be enough to say that I have an ailment of the throat?" He sipped again, the pain on his tongue making him focus. "What does your doctor say?" "I haven't been to a doctor. He couldn't help me anyway." Kovac was about to protest, to offer, when she held up a hand to stop him. "Father, when we first talked, I asked you if you believed in the devil, and you didn't answer me. I can't tell you any more until you do." "I'm a priest," he protested, but it was hollow somehow in the bright little cafe. "I know my catechism. The devils are the fallen angels that tempt us, ultimately powerless." "Yes," she replied, "but do you believe?" Shrewd she was, to be unsatisfied with his answer. It made him uneasy. He could not hope to earn her trust, or the truth of her story, without offering some of his own. "I believe in God, in Christ his Son, and the Holy Spirit. The whole creed, definitely, yes. But the devil?" He sat back and smoothed his sweater once, twice. "You might as well ask me if I believe in the Garden of Eden. Of course I believe the story is true, in a metaphorical sense. That is to say, it's an allegory that teaches us valuable lessons about obedience and knowledge. But do I think it actually happened?" He spread his hands. "No, it'd be a little ridiculous if it had." "I thought all was possible with God." "All is, but that doesn't mean that everything in the Bible is historically accurate." She sat back in her chair and studied his face. He didn't blush, but sipped his coffee again. Having cooled, it was easily drinkable, and now he didn't want it any more. "That's an odd answer," she said at last, "from a priest." "Now I know you haven't hung around many priests. We're not literalists."
"Free thinkers?"
"Rational, I'd say."
"Opera buffs?"
He laughed. "Once upon a time, maybe. We are encouraged to be polymaths. I may have slipped a bit in recent years, but that's how I found your name." Her smile dimmed. He knew the look. He was losing her. No priest could stand that look. "I don't know that I believe in the devil you have in mind, but I assure you, I believe evil exists. And more important, I believe in people. You can truly tell me anything, and I will listen. I'll believe you." She took a deep breath and held it. He counted the seconds, 3, 4, 5, until she blew it out, shaking her head. She clipped the plastic lid in place over her cup and stood, the chair squeaking against the floor behind her. "Thank you, Father. I'm sure you'd mean to, but I just can't." She turned to leave. He felt the loss heavy on his shoulders. "See you next year," he said, as casually as he could. He could just see the nod from the back of her head as she stepped through the door of the cafe. The next year, it snowed. Not just snow, but a blizzard. Mass on Thursday was even more sparsely populated than usual. Just the 2 old women from the residential facility across the way and the young man who arrived on cross-country skis from his apartment in the center of town. Catherine was not there. Kovac said the Mass as quickly as he could while remaining reverent. Those in the pews who had removed their coats had them on again by the end of communion, and once the final blessing was given, they practically ran to the doors. Kovac looked at the white candles and their holder, took one last look at the church to see if she had arrived, then sighed loudly into the air as he carried the setup back to the sacristy. He'd scared her off. That was his first thought, never content to blame the weather, an act of God, when he could be the one at fault. Too aggressive, not respectful enough of her privacy and her space and her story, whatever it was, which she was not obligated to share with him. It frustrated him, though he tried to keep his breathing slow. It was not his fault. He couldn't reach everyone. Learn something for the next time, he thought. But would there be a next time? He wondered not just if Catherine would ever return, but anyone like her. Who else cared so much for the blessing? Even to himself, he had to confess he wasn't into it the way she was. For him, it was a bit of history, maybe a small comfort to the ill. Catherine seemed to have true faith in it. He was lost in these thoughts. He'd removed his alb some 5 minutes ago, and now he was cold. He shrugged on his sweater and left the sacristy, wandering back to the church, making sure everything was as it should be. He looked through the windows at the snow falling outside. It was tapering off, but he should have canceled the morning mass anyway. Time for all good Christians to be at home with a book and a cup of something warm. "Father?" Catherine stood in the doorway, invading snowflakes swirling around her feet, slush falling from her shoes onto the rug. She was almost unrecognizable with a scarf wrapped around her neck and hat pulled down so far only her eyes were visible. "Am I too late?" she asked in a hoarse whisper, barely audible, her hand over her mouth. Kovac felt tears pricking in his eyes and removed his glasses to give his eyes a good rubbing. When the fireworks cleared his vision, she was still there. He beamed at her. "Never too late," he said. "Let me get the candles." The snow once abating, thought better of it during the time it took to perform the blessing. The whiteness was dizzying. Kovac stood at the door, shivering against the snow beside Catherine, neither wanting to venture into it lest gravity abandon them like a snow globe shaken, and they fly into the air, landing who knows where. "Do you need an escort to your car?" he asked. She didn't answer for a long time. Then, "Actually, I was wondering if I could buy you a coffee." The cafe was just visible across the street, the "open" sign a weak pink blinking through the flakes before switching off altogether. "I've got a better idea," said Kovac. "I'll duck out to the rectory and grab some coffee, and we can drink it in here." "Is that allowed?" If Jesus had a problem with eating and drinking in his presence, he had a funny way of showing it, feeding 5,000 people and turning water into wine. "I'll be back in a few minutes. Make yourself comfortable." The housekeeper hadn't made it in that day, so it took Kovac longer than he wanted to prepare 2 mugs of coffee, but he figured it out, and even put them in a box to protect against the snow on the way back. He handed the hot mug to Catherine, who had removed her coat and sat stiffly in a pew. She was close to the aisle, so he sat in the pew across from her. "Just don't spill it," he said. "Jesus forgives, but the staff would have my head." She didn't laugh, but sipped at the coffee. Kovac said a silent prayer that she wouldn't be able to tell it was instant, or that maybe he added too much water. He drank his own coffee, which allayed his fears a little, and watched her face. Years in the confessional taught him the signs of someone waiting to speak, and he could see them even through a lattice. They were written all over her face. So he waited and sipped. "Can I tell you something, Father?" "Anything." Anything did not spill from her mouth. He cleared his throat. "If it would make you more comfortable, we could move to the confessional, but I promise you anything you say will be held in confidence." She glanced around the empty church, eyeing the confessional doors. "No, here is fine." She set her cup gingerly on the pew beside her, then folded her hands in her lap. Taking a deep breath, she began her story. "I'm not sure how to begin, so I'll just tell you what happened. I was on a tour with some colleagues in Venice. It was the first time I'd been there professionally, so I was really excited. We had just sung in a recital, and now we had 2 days off to see the sights. One of my friends and I decided to take our own personal walking tour, look at the churches, that sort of thing. Nothing out of the ordinary, and everything is in walking distance in Venice. I've been there decades ago, but I doubt much has changed." "Then you know they say you can't get lost in Venice. Every street is marked and every corner has arrows to guide you. But somehow my friend and I got lost, very lost. We wound up in an old church to ask for directions, but it was abandoned, or so we thought." She fidgeted. "I've tried to find the church since. I used Google Maps, but it wasn't there. I went to a library even once to see if an old map had it. Nothing. Retracing my steps as best I could, it was all dead ends. Venice is islands, you know, islands connected by bridges. It looked like the island with this church wasn't on the maps. It didn't exist. But somehow we found it." A pause. "I think I do have a confession after all. Pride is a sin, right?" "Are you perhaps getting ahead of yourself?" Kovac asked, daring to believe the best of her. "Not at all. It was all my fault, you see. The recital went well. Flowers were thrown at us, autographs, the whole thing. But mostly for me. I sang exquisitely, which must have attracted its attention. And then when Marie and I set off to explore, I was the one who picked the route. I made the turns, led her to God knows where. I don't even know what I was looking for, but I thought I knew everything. I don't know anything. I don't know. Kovach's coffee had turned cold in his cup, but he drank more anyway. What happened in the church, Catherine? She looked him straight in the eyes. You promised to believe me? Yes, and he meant it. The devil was in that church. At least, that's the only way I can describe it. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a creature with goat legs or glowing eyes like in the movies, but somehow the devil lived in that church. I could feel him. He set down his cup and coffee dregs on the pew so he could give her his full attention. Go on. She sniffed long against threatening tears. I felt a presence that came into me through my ears and my mouth as I breathed, and it lodged there like a sore throat or choking, or when you're about to cry and your throat tenses up. She blinked, no doubt experiencing the sensation at the moment. It sounds so stupid. I could breathe, I could talk, but I felt disgusting. I told my friend we had to get out of there. I was so scared. You have to understand, I was a singer. Anything happened to my throat, it would be the end of my career. Somehow, we found our way back to the signs on the street corners. It was fine. I went to the hotel, found their piano, did some scales. I could sing. It was easy. That's good, surely. No, that's just it. It was too easy. I wasn't warmed up, but my voice sounded like I've never heard it before. Smooth and strong. I took the scales up and up. I'm a mezzo, but I was hitting coloratura soprano notes with almost no effort. Do you understand how strange that is? Only vaguely. It was probably clear on his face, and he wished he had more coffee to hide behind. She continued, It's strange. It's wrong. I hadn't sung all day. I was even a little tired from the night before. But here was this sound. It scared me, like something dark echoed within my voice, something that only I could hear. I thought I was alone, but I wasn't. There was a guy there, one of the hotel staff, probably just came to make sure no one was damaging the piano, and he looked at me, stared at me. He didn't say anything, and I think he was going to cry from me warming up. Kovach's thoughts slid smoothly into the track of the best explanation, the optimism he was used to sharing in the confessional with the types who were frightened. Tread carefully, old man, he told himself. Hearing an opera singer up close is overwhelming for ordinary people like me. You might have just surprised him. But is it possible that something did happen, but it wasn't evil, but good? Is it possible that what you've described is actually a miracle? I've heard you sing, only on the internet, but it's clear that you have a gift from God. Who else? But maybe, just maybe, God saw fit to amplify it. The look on her face was quizzical, uncomprehending. He reviewed the words and saw how silly they sounded, but he stood by them. He had to. Did you sing your next performance? She nodded. I did. And the same thing happened. I spent the whole morning silent. I didn't even talk. Marie ran interference for me, but it's not so unusual to keep quiet when you've had a scare like that. I did my usual steam and tea. It doesn't matter. I went on stage afraid my voice would seize up and fail me, but more terrified it wouldn't. It didn't. I guess you found the footage of my singing on YouTube. Please promise you won't watch again. He promised. When I sang, I could feel the stillness of the audience. It's the kind of reaction that every singer hopes for, and it was wonderful, and it was awful. I had power over them in that moment, and behind it, in my ears, there was another voice telling me about all I could do, all I could have, if I just sang. But it wasn't just the singing. Even when I spoke, I saw it, saw that infection in people's eyes, how they looked at me. Audience members fell over themselves to get me tissues or a scarf, anything I suggested I wanted. I went to a bar after and didn't pay for a single drink. It scared me so much, I dropped out of the tour. I said it was pharyngitis, but that was a lie. The fact is, I was singing better than ever. But it was wrong. Eventually, I stopped speaking any more than I had to. I live alone. It's been so lonely. Wait. Kovac sat up a bit. You're saying that even talking to people puts them under a sort of spell? Is that it? She looked away. It sounds dumb when you say it like that. No dumber than blaming the devil. He waved her quiet and finished his thought. I mean, if your speaking voice does that, why isn't it doing it now? I don't feel any different talking to you. I want to hear the end of your story, of course, but none of the other effects you describe seem to be happening. She nodded. It's because of the ritual, don't you get it? I spent a lot of time on the internet doing research for this where no one could see me or judge me. And I found this for throat diseases, and I thought, why not? Maybe that would be the answer. There are so few churches where you can find it, and it's not like it's something that they advertise. Somehow I stumbled on you, and I came that first time, and it worked. You believe the blessing helps? Kovac flinched at the two words he knows he shouldn't have said. I know it does. It keeps the power at bay. I don't want it in me. I want it gone. But I don't know if that's even possible. So I get the blessing, and it stays away for a while, for almost a year. And then I keep quiet until I do it again. She had run out of words, her hands folded neatly into her lap, her head down, watching them as if they would do something amazing. But they didn't. Kovac said, It sounds crazy. You want to say, never. Never? It sounds like a Band-Aid. It sounds like maybe you need real help. Not a psychiatrist, not necessarily, but have you ever considered coming to church regularly? You say you aren't even baptized. Maybe that would be a first step. But if I did that, I'd have to think about it every week. Don't you already? I don't want to join. I don't want any of that. I just want this to go away. The ritual works. When she raised her eyes to him, they were wet. Please, tell me you'll keep doing it. I'll keep coming. Isn't that enough? Or do you not believe me? He had no answer. He had his promise, so he fell back on that. I believe you, and I want to help. You are. Please, just keep doing what you're doing. I will until the Lord wants me to stop. She didn't laugh. She smiled, tight and awkward. Thanks for the coffee, she said, handing him the mug. Did he believe her? No, he didn't. Or he didn't want to. Both possibilities unsettled him. He did as much research as he could on the cranky rectory computer. There was nothing quite like this documented, but was he even looking at the right documents? He could have asked for help. Father Dan was 30 years younger and better at the internet. He knew an old Jesuit at the local university who could have helped him ask the right questions and access the right books for the answers. But he asked neither of these. Why? Because he didn't believe it. Poor Catherine had a mental illness, maybe, brought on by some sort of real bodily throat problem. She was superstitious, but that was fine. He knew plenty of performers who were, and openly so. She needed help, and while he was happy to provide spiritual counseling and the annual blessing, how much longer would that be sustainable? He did seek out that YouTube video he'd promised he wouldn't. It was time for his confession anyway. But the computer crashed, and he forgot to try again later. He was forgetting more and more these days. Catherine was there on the next 3rd of February, joining the line behind the regular parishioners, accepting the blessing and ducking out. She didn't stay to chat again. Could she smell his insincerity? She seemed happy enough to see him, and that same look of relief and peace descended on her once he'd said the words and removed the candles. But no more outpourings of feeling. It continued this way for a few more years. Snow, rain, it didn't matter. She came, and he was there for her, with his candles, alone or not, mass canceled or not. He watched her face grow more lined with worry than age. On one occasion, she waited for him, and he nearly hopped down the aisle to meet her. When he got there, out of breath and ashamed of his old body, all she said was, "You need to take better care of yourself, Father." Then she was gone. Nearly a year later, Father Kovac had his first heart attack. Probably not his first, the doctor was swift to tell him, citing something on the EKG. Kovac sighed and looked out the window, not listening. He faced a long stay at the hospital. He ticked day after boring day off the calendar. January became February, and on the 3rd, Catherine appeared in his room, carrying a large purse. "What are you doing here?" he asked her, with delight and surprise. She didn't answer, her lips pressed together so tight that they lost their color, but rather pointed to her watch and to the calendar posted on the wall. "I'm sorry," he said. "I've had to miss it this year. Are you all right?" She didn't answer, but rummaged in her purse and pulled out 2 red tapers, the kind that came in 12 packs at the grocery store, on deep discount this time of year. Her eyebrows lifted hopefully. "Yes," he said, laughing for the first time since he'd been brought to this place. "Those will do just fine." Kovac was released from the hospital with orders for mild exercise and plenty of rest. He took as much of either as he could, but the parish was short of priests, and he had duties to perform. He was slower, and the looks on the faces of the congregation, while still full of respect, now added pity. People were more careful around him. He hated it. If only he had managed to convert Catherine. Then he would have had a friendly face every week, a face that knew things could be a lot worse. He worried about her, her increased silence, her aging face, and the most frustrating thing about it was that he knew no more about her than he did 15 years ago. He didn't know what she did for a living now, or even where she lived. He didn't want to press. Nor had he made much progress on the belief front. Tack up another weakness on the scoreboard. At his age, many people found solace in their religion, but he was confronting the possibility he didn't believe in any of it. He enjoyed performing niche blessings, knowing about them when so few did. It wasn't a power trip, God no. Though, thinking about it, any priest who said he didn't get some high off the power granted him was lying. But was this about what he enjoyed or what God wanted? Questions chased each other and left a sour taste in his mouth, or maybe it was the medications. Damn. He had hoped that at least one positive to come from his heart attack would have been renewed faith, but he had seen no light, had heard no voices, and had no more answers than he did before. Humility, at least, was a gift not withheld from him. The clock on the wall chimed. Time to get ready for Mass. Time to make the gestures and say the words and hope that someone was listening. January had been mild, and 2 days into February followed the same course. It was wrong to be outside with no coat in the new year. The world was going crazy, and Father Kovach, walking slowly down the aisle after Mass, was not up for any of it. She hadn't come. It was Sunday, so with 2 Masses, the blessing of St. Blaise after each of them, and she was nowhere to be seen. He'd waited after the first Mass. When he went to get lunch, he told one of the other priests to keep an eye on the church in case she showed up. He waited through the next Mass, wincing at Father Dan's shallow homily, and after for hours. The church got cold as the sun went down, and he'd forgotten his sweater. Why had he never gotten her phone number? He had no way to contact her, and it would have been nice to call and check on her instead of freezing in this hard pew. It was dinner time, and he grumbled along with his stomach. He heard the roughness of his breathing in his ears and counted slowly in and out as he brought it back to normal. He couldn't let himself get angry or excited or much of anything anymore. If he was going to survive until she showed up, he needed to calm down. Hail Mary, inhale, full of grace, exhale, the Lord is with thee. The knock at the door was barely that, more like a cat scratching to get in. He almost didn't hear it, and when he did, he kept at his prayer, exhaling loudly, now at the hour of our death. He got up slowly, dragged himself to the door, and grunted as he pushed it open. Catherine's face was there, sallow in the fluorescent bulb that shone on the church door at all hours. "Catherine, are you all right? I was worried." She pushed past him, and he lost his balance, leaning on the door to steady himself. Meanwhile, Catherine had walked halfway up the aisle and, her gaze firmly set on the crucifix over the altar, sank to her knees. She hugged herself and said nothing. "I'll get the candles," Kovach said. She didn't answer, but started rocking, and he was nervous that she would throw up. He walked around the outer edge of the pews, watching between them as Catherine's figure blinked on and off like under faulty lighting or through a kinetoscope. His knees cracked loudly as he reverenced before the altar, and when he reached for the candles, his hands were shaking. Over his shoulder, Catherine was still rocking, and a low hum suffused the space between them. Kovach hurried as fast as he could, carrying the candles in their holder, but not bothering to light them. Once he stood before her, he could hear the hum was coming from her, a keening from her throat. He listened to it, all other noise falling away into nothing. He didn't know how long he listened, but he came to kneel before Catherine, before the sound that was her voice and something other, something beautiful. She called into his face, "Father!" And his head snapped up. His heart was racing. "Hail Mary, full of grace. Father, help me." He brought the shaking candles to her throat, poking her in the cheek first. Through the intercession of St. Blaise, bishop and martyr." Catherine was screaming against teeth clenched shut. Kovach lost track of the prayer, lost the words. Starting over, Through the intercession of Saint Blaise, bishop and martyr, may God deliver you from every disease of the throat and from every other illness, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. The old words had turned stale and rang like something out of a cheesy exorcism movie, the kind he hated to admit he loved for all their ridiculousness. There was nothing funny now, and Catherine didn't stop screaming and rocking. It hadn't worked. Her eyes were locked on his, begging, weeping. Such faith, failing her now, failing him. He lowered the candles. "I can't," he said. "I can't do this. I can't help you." Except that he hadn't really tried. The priest in the cheesy exorcism movies died more often than not, but did it matter? Did any of this matter if he wasn't willing to enter into the space of suffering with her? If he discounted the evidence of his own eyes and ears? He had held himself back for 20 years out of cowardice or hubris. He had to sacrifice both for her sake. Could he? He reached for her hand, pressed against her belly as she rocked. He held it firm, their bodies close, energy pouring off her and warming him, warming his heart. "Lord, I believe you," he whispered, practically into her hair. "Help my unbelief." Another deep breath, and another whisper. "Through the intercession of Saint Blaise, bishop and martyr." Something told him to improvise, and he ran with it. "And all the angels and saints, may God deliver you from every disease of the throat and from every other illness, from the torment that plagues you and the unbelief that plagues me, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." Catherine froze. Kovac sat back, landing hard on the stone floor of the aisle. The candles fell free of his hands and their holder, rolling away. He watched as she began to heave. Her throat worked and her teeth ground together. Then her mouth opened like something on a spring. Kovac saw shadow inside, infinite shadow. Darkness deeper than any throat could be. And then it poured out like bile, like molasses dripping down her chin and filling in the cracks between the stones of the floor, before she heaved again and a shallow tide of ichor swept through. The thudding of his chest was familiar and terrifying. He backed away from the spreading puddle as quickly as he could on hands and knees. He looked up at Catherine. Their positions a moment ago now reversed. She made no noise as she stood and turned away, running. When she returned, she had her hands cupped before her like a supplicant. She spread her fingers and water poured down, turning the puddle to steam. She ran back to the baptismal font and brought back more, a third time, until the puddle was gone. Kovac was on his back on the floor now, only hearing Catherine call his name through a fog. This was the way it ended. He was all right. If he'd done well, he'd know for sure very soon. He heard her call again, her voice growing fainter and fainter, but the important thing was it was her voice. The hospital was exactly as he remembered it, down to the smell. It seemed bigger, or perhaps he was smaller. He felt smaller. Catherine came to visit him as soon as they allowed her to. The color was returned to her face. It had only been a week, but what a difference. "Are you all right, Father? Are you comfortable?" He turned his head to face her as much as he felt he could. His voice was a small, shaking thing. "I'm alive, and you're all right." It's more than I could ask for, and I thank God." Her expression was pained. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. It was so strong that morning. I didn't think it would be safe to come for the blessing with the others, but then I couldn't fight it." He shushed her. "You did the right thing. This was never something you could fight on your own. I'm honored that I could help, even if it took me so long to do so. It's all right. It's gone for good now. It's over." Forgivenesses exchanged, the conversation floated to other, more mundane topics. Kovac listened to Catherine describe her future plans, loving the sound of her voice the way he used to love his own, the joy in it, the freedom. When the nurse came to whisk her away at the end of visiting hours, Catherine pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "Will I see you once you're better?" "God willing." Catherine pressed the paper into his palm. "What's this?" "My cell number. Let's keep in touch." His fingers closed over the paper, and he smiled.
That was Jessica Lévai's The Blessing of St. Blaise, as read by Brian Rollins. Brian Rollins is a voice actor residing in Denver, Colorado. He's voiced over a dozen audiobooks, including the popular Glenn and Tyler series. Horror fans will want to check out his narration of Ancient Enemies by Brian McKinley, a vampire political thriller. You can visit Brian at his website, thevoicesinmyhead.com, or on Twitter at VoicesOfBrian. Thank you, Brian. Well, children of the night, the hour is late, and we've run out of tales to tell. For now. Tales to Terrify is made possible by the tremendous generosity of our supporters on Patreon and PayPal. Incredible fans like Lestle Baxter, Amanda Carrillo, Amanda Gottfried, and Orion D. Hegre, whose generous support keeps these lights on and flickering ominously. If you're not a supporter, head over to patreon.com/Tales to Terrify. You'll find all kinds of perks, like ad-free episodes, bonus content, and one-of-a-kind collectibles. Every dollar goes back into this show, and we appreciate your support so much. Want another way to support the show that doesn't cost you a cent? Head over to Podchaser, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts and drop us a 5-star review. You'll not only put an unnaturally wide smile on our faces, but help new listeners discover our terrifying tales too. You can show your love of the show out in the world with some Tales to Terrify merch. TalesToTerrify.com/merch will take you to our TeePublic store, where we've got a great collection of creepy custom and curated designs. Tales to Terrify is produced by Seth Williams, Meredith Morgenstern, Andrew Gibson, Crystal Hammond, Spencer Disparty, and myself, Drew Sebastini, with original theme by Nebulous Entertainment. Tales to Terrify is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Join us again next week, as we're scared stiff with more Tales to Terrify.